So I think we'll begin now. Please let me start by welcoming you all. Many thanks for joining this, the fourth webinar in the series on innovation and the SDGs. My name is Gareth James Lloyd and I'm a Senior Advisor at UNEP-DHI Partnership. We're a United Nations Environment Collaboration Centre in the area of freshwater and environment. My job is to be your facilitator of this webinar today, and with Maija Bertule, also of UNEP-DHI, providing technical support. If you would like to learn more about who we are and what we do at UNEP-DHI, then please feel free to, of course, check out our website after we're done here. This webinar series is organized by UNEP-DHI in collaboration with the Academy by DHI and of course with other valued partners from related organizations coming in and making additional contributions on content. The overall aim of this series is to give an insight into the role that innovative approaches can play in supporting the water-related Sustainable Development Goals, or SDGs. And so far we've had 4 webinars. The first was on the significance of the SDGs for water management in the next decades. Following that, number 2, we had innovative approaches for capacity building to achieve the SDGs. Then as number 3, we had supporting SDG 6 monitoring and reporting with Earth observations, our most recent one. And all of those are available online already from our website. And today we're going to be looking at innovative approaches and tools for improved management of floods and droughts. And on the agenda today, we have Frederik Pischke, who's at GWP, and he's going to be talking about building drought resilience to reduce poverty. Following that, we're going to have Oluf Jessen from DHI, who will be talking about drought risk management and various tools for improved planning. And last but not least, we will have Ole Larsen from DHI, who will be talking about the importance of data for insurance in relation to flood and drought events. As usual, each presentation is going to be approximately 10 minutes, and as usual, I'm going to be a little strict on timekeeping to make sure we can cover the ground we need to cover. So presenters, if you go over time, I'm going to be pulling the plug on you at some point, so sorry for that in advance. But time permitting, the plan is to allow for 1 to 2 questions immediately after each presentation, with time to take some additional questions at the end. And to you, the participants, in the panel on the right of your screen, you should be able to see a box for submitting questions. You may have to pull that out from that sidebar there. So please feel free to make good use of that and send the questions to me and Maija along the way, and we will do our best to field those. If you could make your questions of course broadly relevant to the rest of the participants, that will give us that will make it easier for us to pick up on them. What's next? Yes, so as mentioned, Frederik's presentation is going to be the first of our 3 presentations today. So without further ado, I'd like to ask Maija to pass control over to Frederik so he can begin. Frederik, please unmute your mic, and whenever you're ready, begin. I'll let you know. Yeah, that's it. We can see your presentation, so please feel free to go ahead.
Thank you, Gareth, and thank you to UNEP-DHI for this opportunity. My name is Frederik Pischke. I'm a GWP Senior Program Officer based at the World Meteorological Organization and working on the WMO-GWP Integrated Drought Management Program, as well as a joint program on flood management, the associated program on flood management. In this presentation, I will try to elucidate how drought and flood management feature in the SDGs and discuss some of the collaborative efforts on moving towards an integrated approach to drought management. In this presentation, I will highlight the central elements of drought management planning and the role of drought monitoring indices. An expert task force of the Global Water Partnership and OECD found in its report Securing Water Sustaining Growth that water insecurity costs the global economy at least $500 billion annually. Flood damages are estimated at $120 billion per year from urban property damage alone. Major droughts were found to reduce per capita GDP growth by 0.5 percentage point. Thus, drought and flood management provide many essential and often measurable socioeconomic benefits. Let me take this opportunity to go briefly through the SDGs and give you some highlights on where floods and droughts come out most prominently. In SDG 1, particularly Target 1.5 highlights the exposure and vulnerability to climate-related extreme events. In SDG 2, highlights the need to strengthen capacity for adaptation to climate change, extreme weather, drought, and flooding. And of course, SDG 6 on improving water quality, on increasing water use efficiency, on implementing integrated water resources management, and protecting and restoring water-related ecosystems, drought and flood management feature prominently. On SDG 9, on developing and facilitating sustainable and resilient infrastructure development, we go to SDG 11, it highlights the impact that need to be reduced caused by disasters, including water-related disasters, and the need for integrated policies to strengthen the resilience to disasters. SDG 13 on climate action highlights the need to strengthen resilience and adaptive capacity to climate-related hazards and integrate climate change measures into national policies, strategies, and planning. If we go further to SDG 15, on restoring degraded land and soil, including land affected by desertification, drought, and floods. And finally, of course, the SDG 17 on strengthening the means of implementation, that where technology, capacity building, systemic issue, and not least multi-stakeholder partnerships are highlighted to address the overall development agenda in which droughts and floods feature. So in this presentation, I will draw on the experience gained from the collaborative efforts of GWP and the World Meteorological Organization on drought and flood management through the aforementioned associated program on flood management and the integrated drought management program, which help countries implement flood and drought management practices. Both programs bring together the expertise of over 50 expert institutions on flood and drought management to support countries move towards an integrated approach based on IWM principles aiming to strengthen resilience to water extremes for preparing for and mitigating the negative effects of floods and droughts and harnessing the benefits of floodplains. Both programs are working towards greater synergies in addressing water extremes. The background of the Integrated Drought Management Program and the background to much of what I'll be talking about is a high-level meeting on national drought policies in 2013, which articulated the integrated approach to drought management, focusing on greater collaboration, risk reduction, risk sharing, and risk transfer tools, linking of drought management plans to development policies, and stressing the need for proactive drought impact mitigation, preventive, and planning measures. Many of you know the cycle of disaster management, and one of the key messages coming out of it is that we need to help and see how we can move from reactive to proactive drought policies. And although we are aware of the need for this change for many years through debating disaster risk management, we see that this shift is happening not to the extent or very slowly only in practice. The high-level meeting on national drought policy established the pillars of integrated drought management. These pillars include promoting standard approaches to vulnerability and impact assessment, implementing effective drought monitoring, early warning and information system, and enhancing preparedness and mitigation actions. The IDMP works on it and aims to operationalize this, the work that was coming out of the high-level meeting on national drought policy by working together with partners and applying existing approaches and existing knowledge, bringing that together, trying to see where are the gaps that we need to fill. This is operationalized in the IDMP through a help desk that is currently being built up. It consists of an ask section offering point of contact to expertise, a find section providing existing knowledge resources, and a connect facility providing an overview and a connection to ongoing initiatives. Let me now focus on some specific tools or guidelines that has been developed in the Integrated Drought Management Program. Earlier this year, we launched a Handbook of Drought Indicators and Indices that I hope might be applicable to some of the work that you're doing. It covers the most commonly used drought indicators and indices. There are 48 currently in there, but it's a living document with an online tool where additional indicators can be proposed and further information sought with this help desk idea in mind. It is intended for drought practitioners, so the National Meteorological and Hydrological Services, resource manager, and decision makers such as public authorities. It's a starting point, and it shows which indicators are available in what places they are used, and it is designed with a drought risk management process in mind. The choice of indicators depends obviously on the needs and needs to be based on the specific characteristics of the drought most closely associated with the drought impact of concern. So it is a reference providing an overview and guide to sources for further information. And just as there is no one-size-fits-all definition of drought, there is no single index or indicator that can account for and be applied to all droughts in the different climates and of concern to the sectors affected by drought. The following questions may help users to decide which indicators and indices are most appropriate for their situation. Do the indicators allow for timely detection of drought in order to trigger appropriate communication and coordination of drought responses or mitigation actions? Are the indices sensitive to the climate, space, and time in order to determine the drought onset and determination of the drought? Are the indicators and various severity levels responsive and reflective of the impacts occurring on the ground for a given location or region? Are the chosen indicators and indices and triggers the same or different for going into and coming out of a drought, keeping in mind that it's critical to account for both situations? Are composite indicators being used in order to take many factors and inputs into account? Are the data and resultant indices available and stable? In other words, is there a long period of record for the data sources that can give planners and decision makers a strong historical and statistical markers? And finally, are the indices easy to implement? Do the users have the resources to dedicate to efforts, and will they be maintained diligently when not in a drought situation? This can be better justified if such a system is set up for monitoring all aspects of the hydrologic or climatic cycle, not just droughts. Overall, we need to reflect on that the simplest indicator to use is typically one that is already being produced operationally and freely available. But this does not necessarily mean that it's the best or most applicable. Ultimately, the choice has to be determined by users at the regional, national, and local level. The preferred and recommended approach is for users to take a multiple indicator approach as part of a drought early warning system within the context of a comprehensive drought mitigation plan. Now moving to the second tool or guidelines that I wanted to introduce is the National Drought Management Policy Guidelines, which adapt a 10-step process first developed in the US by Don Wilhite and is in direct response to the need articulated at the high-level meeting on national drought policies to help countries advance on planning more consistently for drought before they occur. It is a template that can be adapted to national realities and needs and builds on existing risk management capacities. So what is essential for drought management policy is to reduce underlying factors of drought risk and reconcile contradictory policy recommendation and move from crisis management to risk reduction, move from regular financial emergency assistance to measures supporting on-farm management of risks, so very much a shift in culture, focus on the implementation, enforcement of early actions, which means, for example, the translation of plans into budgetary processes, adequate governance and community ownership, which is admittedly difficult with low onset and invisible issues, and foster drought awareness, knowledge management, and education. And it may be recommended to build on existing disaster risk management frameworks, avoiding compartmentalization, yet providing specificity, ensuring an alignment of different levels of government to a risk management plan. What is shown to be essential from our experience in places like Mexico and the Horn of Africa is that there is political commitment, a high-level engagement, and clear responsibilities at the central and local level, seizing opportunities of awareness that is moments when the impact of a drought are severe and have their attention in the public debate to strengthen the drought risk reduction framework. And this is an example of how the National Drought Management Policy Guidelines have been adapted to the regional context of Central and Eastern Europe in our regional program there. And that is the adaptation to how it features in the EU Water Framework Directive, or how the EU Water Framework Directive can be used in order to feature drought management plans through the river basin management plans more prominently. And to wrap up, just to give you an overview of where we're active, you can find out more by visiting our website, droughtmanagement.info. In Central and Eastern Europe, I already mentioned. In the Horn of Africa, we have a regional program. In West Africa, as well as in South Asia, we're working on a drought monitoring system together with the International Water Management Institute. In Central America, regional workshops have been held and training on this standardized precipitation index given. And in South America, there's some efforts on the way to start a regional initiative. As concluding, we can see very much drought as a stress test on how water resources are managed. As a picture on the right aims to elucidate, we need to aim to bridge and integrate different risks holistically rather than isolating risk. Highlighting successful cases of integration with a focus of identifying and addressing obstacles, connecting and exchanging experience among the global, regional, national, and local level. And as I'm certain this webinar will show us, the wealth of knowledge exists already. And it's really a matter of closing the gaps, the knowledge that exists, and communicating and applying the existing knowledge that is there. And with this, I would like to end my presentation, pointing you to our website, and if you have specific questions, to our email address, as well as if you're interested in the guidance and tools on integrated flood management, please also visit the sister program of the IDMP under floodmanagement.info. Thank you.
Thanks very much for that, Frederik. Please don't run away. I'll be asking you a question shortly, but just to pick up, I think that was a great start, and I think the strong presence of floods and droughts in the SDGs is probably indicative of the importance of this area. But a quick question before we carry on. I think you mentioned a help desk. Please could you let the people on this webinar know how they're able to request support through this help desk and who can actually ask for help?
Thank you for that question, Gareth. And first step would be to explore the material already available in the tools and guidelines section of the Integrated Drought Management Library at droughtmanagement.info. And then, as I was mentioned, if you require tailor-made assistance, you can write an email to idmp@wmo.int describing the issue you're seeking support on, and the IDMP Technical Support Unit will get in touch with you, and if specific technical expertise from one of our partners is needed, engage these partners to see how we can best respond to the request. And the help desk and that facility is open, obviously, to everyone. It's specifically tailored to government entities, but we are also, of course, open to other entities that require assistance or would like to collaborate on these issues.
Thanks, Frederik. I think that's very useful. We'll be coming back to you with some more questions. Just a quick call out again, please use the questions box on the right there, and any questions you have for Frederik we'll be picking up on a little bit later. But without further ado, I would like to pass over to Oluf now. And Oluf, whenever you're ready, please could you unmute? Yeah, perfect. Unmute your mic. We can see your presentation, so feel free to start whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Garrett. My name is Oluf Jessen. I'm from DHI, and the title of this presentation is Tools for Improved Drought Risk Management. And the background for this presentation is an ongoing project which is implemented by UNEP and executed by DHI and also the International Water Association. And the presentation is basically presenting some of the outcomes from this project. The main objective with this project is to develop technical tools supporting decision makers and stakeholders with floods and droughts management related to planning at a basin scale and a local scale. Because of the time constraints of this presentation, I will only focus on the drought part, but we also have some specific components related to flood management. This UNEP project is a global project, which means that all the outcomes should be available on a global scale. So we are focusing a lot on global data, satellite data, and also on methods which can be applied in any transboundary river basin or any catchment on the globe. So it's a quite generic. All the outcomes are quite generic, and I will get into more details on this during the presentation. On the drought part, we are focusing on implementing a drought risk reduction framework, which has a data part which is very much focusing on the use of satellite data. We have a, why doesn't this work? We have a drought assessment part based on drought indices, which can help stakeholders identifying areas which are drought impacted or impacted by drought. We have a drought forecasting part, which is based on a climate forecast product, and this we then link up with the calculation of different indices, so we can forecast indices, but we also link it up with different types of models as water resource models or crop models, so we can forecast different drought-related parameters. Then we have a drought risk assessment part where we look at the impacts. Then we have a dissemination and early warning part where we can disseminate automated reports to the stakeholders and we can provide early warning on drought impacts. And then at last we have a drought management or drought planning component, which focuses on evaluating different types of scenarios or interventions, so the user can actually evaluate different what-if scenarios and look at the impacts of this. Now we'll just very briefly go through some of the key tools from the project. Some of these tools are already available or in the testing phase, and some of the tools are still in development. One of the key first tools we were looking at was to make data available, because in a lot of areas that data availability is really one of the key issues when looking at drought management. So we have made a web-based data and information portal where we can supply data and different types of information at any location on the globe. So we can provide different types of satellite data which we update on a daily basis, so we try to update them in very close to real time. We have different types of drought indices which we calculate as soon as we update the satellite data. We have a seasonal forecast product which is used to gives 9 months climate forecast with 20 ensembles. It's a US NOAA model which we use there. And then we have some different climate change information which provides delta change factors on different types of drought relevant data types. For the drought identification part, we as Frederik also explained, we use drought indices a lot. So we have a wide range of drought indices included in our data portal. This example shows the standard precipitation index, but we have indices related to climate, to vegetation, and to soil moisture, and we also look at different types of combined drought indices. And we are trying to evaluate the use and results of the different drought indices as the project moves on, and we will probably expand the list of indices as we move on in the project. On the drought forecast part, there we're looking at we're using a seasonal forecast, a global seasonal forecast model from NOAA, from a US weather model, and then we are applying some different methods for downscaling this seasonal forecast based on local climate information, and then we are using this to forecast different drought indices, but also using it as an input to water resource models and crop models. Then we have an ongoing development on a drought assessment and early warning component, which basically links up to the data portal and to the climate forecast data. And the objective with this drought assessment and early warning component is to be able to make an assessment of the current drought status based on different threshold values, both on duration and also values on the indicators or the indices. And then also make an early warning part based on the forecasted values. This is an upcoming tool which we have just initiated, and we're hoping to have this ready within 3 to 4 months. Then we have a planning component which is also ongoing, where the objective is to make a workflow which allows users to evaluate the impact of different interventions and look at different what-if scenarios so they can evaluate what to do to reduce the impact of a specific drought impact. And this will basically be an interface on top of some existing water resource models, and at the moment we are looking at the DHI model, the Mike Hydro model, which is a water allocation model, and or potentially we will also look at the WEEP model from the Stockholm Environmental Institute. Then we have some drought dissemination and awareness activities. On the tool side, we have some different tools for automated reporting and dissemination to stakeholders, so we can provide automated reports every second week, every month, giving a drought status of how it looks now and also how we will look in the future. And then we also have some physical training events where we have training for stakeholders in different basins, and we will have training materials and webinars on top of this, which will also be released to other stakeholders outside of the project. The project is running until 2018, so we are currently halfway into the project. We have 2 more years to go, and the expectation is that over the next year we are going to release a lot of the tools, as we have been for the last year to year and a half very much in a development phase. So this was very brief about the Floods and Droughts project, and the drought part of this. I've shown the link to the website, and please visit our project website if you're interested in knowing more about the project. And we also have a newsletter which you can sign up to if you want to have be alerted about upcoming news. Thank you.
Many thanks for that, Oluf. So even though you were telling us all about one of the projects you're working on at the moment, the relevance here for the listeners is that what's being developed in this project is and to be disseminated is a range of flood and drought management tools which are going to be of relevance in various geographies globally, and you're getting inputs from a range of experts as you go along. But a couple maybe I'll keep it to one question before we move on. What about the constraints to using these tools or costs? A lot of people will be interested, but is there a catch somewhere? Can you say a few words about that?
Yeah, just very short, because it is a UNEP implemented project, so all the outcomes of this project will be freely available, so there will be no cost or any license constraints to any of the outcomes. So the idea is that the tools will be tested and validated within 3 pilot basins: the Volta Basin, Lake Victoria Basin, and Chao Phraya Basin in Thailand. And after they have been validated in these basins, then they will basically be available for any river basin organization in the world. I think the only constraint is that the tools cannot be used for commercial purposes, but for non-commercial purposes they will be freely available.
Right, and the hydrologists in those basins will be able to pick them up and receive the guidance documents and use those.
That's correct.
Yeah. Okay, many thanks for that. Oluf, don't run away. We're coming back to you shortly, but I'd like, yes, thanks Maija. Ola, please could you feel free to unmute your mic and start whenever you're ready.
Thanks a lot, Garrett, and thanks for everybody listening to this brief presentation. I would like to talk about some actually practical uses of indices that we have used for the financial industry and that we have used to build up protection in general towards both flood and drought. If we look at risk management, and essentially flood and drought is a part of the risks that we are all facing around the world, we have to do a whole range of different things in order to minimize the impact of the risk that we have. And one of the bespoken areas that we as mankind work towards is of course a financial protection towards the severe and devastating impacts often of both floods and droughts. And to give you an example here, what I would like to do is to give you a couple of examples from a number of projects we've been involved in. And I would actually like to start showing you an example here from a rural bank in Philippines. And what you see on the y-axis is the proportion of loans that are defaulting over the time. And this is just a period taken. This local bank is working in the Luzon province in Philippines. And what we see is that we have periods where the default loan rate is very low, and we have periods where the default loan rate is really picking up significantly. And what we see here in Philippines is a tremendous impact of typhoons, so more the flooding than it is of the drought. But we see that there is an immediate impact on the entire financial industry and hence the ability of the financial industry to support other kind of industries and economic growth in the country. This is something that we would like to alleviate because there are many effects of a bank losing its money, and one of the severe effects is of course that when a bank is losing the money because loans are being defaulted, then the bank will have to write down its equity and they will thereby not be able to provide loan to new farmers if they have lost the crop. So new loans will fall out and that can have a very big impact on the entire society. So what we have been working on has been to use indices in making some insurance products. Now we have worked out of a very simple design scheme that what you see here. We want them to be very simple. We want them to be very accessible to people. We want to have it very, very transparent, the means that we are working on, and we want it to be in a very efficient evaluation that we have that we apply. So DHI has been working with Munich Re, but also with other major reinsurers and insurers around the world, working on index or trigger-based insurances. And the entire concept of the way we have been working is that we have been working as an agent to define and develop the triggers, and triggers are usually based on indices, so an indices of drought or indices of flood. And we are calculating these operationally and providing the numbers to Munich Re, and provided that the trigger is exceeded, or then they will pay out the money to some payment system. And this is exactly where we have been putting quite some energy in finding efficient ways of distributing money into financial systems and of actually refueling what is going on. So if we think back to the rural bank, it could be a small retail bank in Philippines, and what we can do in certain cases is actually that we can work with Munich Re fueling, for instance, a national bank that is then giving support to retail banks. In other cases, we're working directly with retail banks that may have reinsurance with a larger insurance companies as well. And what then in turn will happen is that whenever a damage, a natural disaster has happened and there's been a flood and a drought, is that the payment of finances will then be dispersed through the bank or maybe only to the bank. And we have had many cases where the banks have essentially just used the money themselves in order to give emergency loans to the people who have been hit, or to give repayment holidays or temporary relief, or simply loan repayment for the people that have lost the money due to either flood and drought. And this is very efficient if it can be done based on a proper databases. And this is really a part of the important story here, that if we look in most countries around the world, the monitoring network is simply not sufficient to provide proper extreme value statistics and to provide a proper, you can say, spatial distribution of the data. So what we have been using has been, for instance, TRMM data and GPM data for rainfall, whereas we can get proper meteorological models to show what happened with, for instance, wind, like what we see here in Philippines. And we are then, based on this, able to make a categorization of extreme values, and then we can use extreme values as a trigger value for instance, rain and wind. The reason to use an extreme value rather than to use a fixed number of millimeter is actually based on the assumption that there's a certain local you can say adaptation to the climate, which means that if we, for instance, compare in Philippines, the northern Philippines, as you see up here, is very frequently hit by severe wind, whereas the southern is not. So being hit very frequently, the construction way and the crops are different in northern Philippines than they are in the southern part. And the same applied to the agriculture, where Philippines is bespoken seasonal in the northern part and is moist tropical in the southern part. So it's also a different kind of response. And that is actually covered to some extent in the extreme values by using reasonably low values of extreme value statistics that we're doing. So generally we use extreme value triggers of something in the order of 10 to 50-year return periods. And these can actually be established safely based on remote sensing data. An example of the way we evaluate it is that we are setting up systems that are using the data portal that we have, and we are automatically extracting the data, downloading the data, and processing the data for geographical boundaries, like what you see here on the left-hand picture, that we are assessing the numbers in municipalities in Philippines, and we are then categorizing them whether they have been triggered towards an insurance or for insurance payment or not. And we are actually having for Philippines 3 different levels of payment that we are issuing, and we can do that more or less at the same time as the typhoon is ongoing. So for floods where we have rapid events that are emerging more or less within days, this is of course very different from floods to droughts, but we can actually issue the warnings and payments within less than 5 days. And for these particular insurance products, that is actually made a money transfer within 5 days from reinsurer to beneficiary. So that is a very, very rapid relief and is based on remote sensing data. This is just another example of the systems we have been setting up. This system covers Mexico, and we have made this for a primary insurance company that is looking at it. We have made it for different crops, and for Mexico we evaluate both for drought and for flood, and we are then building indices for these crops around. Here we are actually using a cropping schedule, and we are using crop seasons. So we have the cropping schedule, and we calculate the indices and required, you can say, precipitation for the different growth stages that we're working in. And this is somewhat more detailed, you can argue, because we are then getting a little bit closer to agronomy. We are not only forecasting or not only measuring the number of millimeter, but actually translate that into a crop growth, and thereby we can work with a little bit more differentiated insurance products, because some areas are more dry than other areas, where you would generally see shift in cultivars and see how people are dealing differently with the issues, especially of drought. So feeding the data in using a data portal to take the data are available. We can actually extrapolate them all the way out to be something that give immediate financial benefit to the people that are struggling the negative impact of floods and droughts. And these evaluation schemes can be automated and can be made very, very cheaply. This way of evaluating an insurance product is, as I mentioned, a low cost compared to standard indemnity insurance, and we have developed it to cover both sovereign insurances as well as very local insurances in a range of countries. One of our later applications within this has been both developed for flood and drought, which is actually smartphone applications that we are using for damage reporting and for verification of the remote sensing data. We have found this particularly useful in many countries around the world because smartphone technology is actually now implemented almost everywhere and is frequently a good way to actually get assessment of the incidents and also get a wider scale. So there's an ability today to bridge all the way from larger scale remote sensing into very local observations using the crowd in between. I would like you to urge you to take a look at our webpage for water data, where we compare some of the data, where we distribute some of the data, as well as some of our financial products that we have presented under globalcati.com web pages. Thanks a lot for your attention.
And many thanks to you also, Ola. I think what you've presented here is quite a new area probably for many of us, and of course issues such as sustainable financing and involvement of the private sector are some things that are given quite a lot of lip service, but it's nice to see something very concrete here with those two examples from Philippines and Mexico. But one of the questions we have here is this kind of insurance relevant for other less developed countries, perhaps where data is scarce or perhaps where insurance companies are more risk adverse? Could you say a couple of words about that?
Yes, I would be happy to. I believe this is particularly important for many of the less developed countries because we find that they're specifically vulnerable when your financial industry is poor. And we find that many of the poor countries are really hit very, very bad, and we need a method to refuel especially the local finance institutions. So we have also been working in countries like Pakistan to develop index-based insurances there. And we find that, for instance, many countries that are Islam countries, they have advantages in having a religion that actually support this kind of sharing and of you can say responsibility and of helping other people when the need is big. So I would find that particular these type of microinsurances are important in the poor countries.
That's great. I mean, to find out that these kind of tools which enable an insurance company to be able to quantify the risk would give them more of an appetite to go into countries and offer support. I mean, we have Mexico and Philippines, but the next question is, what are the plans to bridge this out to other countries?
Yeah, for us as such, we have actually developed the data services in a way that we can bridge it out to any country, that it is more like a question for the insurance and financial industry. So we have been working in particular in the Caribbean area, in Latin America. We have been working in Asia, in particular for developing these index products. So we would like, of course, to expand it even further, and we believe that the tools are available for doing it.
That's great. Thank you very much for that. I would like to open up to some of the other questions we've received as we've gone along. If you could unmute your mic, Frederik, I'd like to give one to you. Let me know when you're ready.
Sure, please. Go ahead.
Great. In your presentation, you mentioned some barriers, or there are barriers, sorry, moving from reactive to proactive management. And I'm sure people write books on what these barriers are, but please could you just highlight a few of the most common?
Okay, thanks for that question. Well, one of the barriers we see is that drought is often invisible and is often very quickly forgotten when the next rain hits in. So that's I see as one of the main barriers, and with it goes the political attention to it. There's been some really good work done on this under the headline of "Don't waste the drought." So when there is a drought, it's a big opportunity to move towards explaining what a proactive approach, a risk management approach, might mean and how you can be better prepared the next time this comes around. And so that's what I would say is the biggest, is the political will and making use of the opportunities of where there is heightened attention in order to move towards a more proactive risk management approach.
Great, thanks for that. Another quick question. Do you have, or are there in the pipeline any new initiatives or activities specifically going to be designed in support of the SDGs?
Well, all of our work is really trying to focus on how we can move the SDGs forward. And in the Global Water Partnership, we're developing an SDG water preparedness facility to help countries become more ready to move forward for implementing the Sustainable Development Goals. So really trying to grapple with what is it that in the country can move progress towards achieving the Sustainable Development Goals further. And that's something that we're supporting through the Drought Management Program as well as through the Flood Management Program, as we see the many connections that a better management of drought and flood management would have in order to move us further in achieving the Sustainable Development Goals.
Great. So what I also understood from your answer is that the SDGs are a way, perhaps, of getting your message out to a broader audience, of generating that political will to get some action on the ground. Many thanks for that, Frederik. I would like now to move over to Oluf with a question for him. Oluf, could you let me know when your mic's open and you're ready?
I'm fine, thank you.
Okay, great. Please could you tell us, are any of these tools already being used or localized outside the project, or are there any plans to?
Thanks for the question, Gerd. I mean, we are working in 3 pilot basins, and the intention is that the tool should be implemented in these basins. And we have yearly trainings where we train the stakeholders in the use of the tools. But as we are 2 years into the project, we have so far been very much in a development phase. So the intention is that for the upcoming training sessions, which will start in December and carry on for the coming 2-3 months, there we will actually introduce some of the tools that are ready, and the hope is that we can then support the implementation of the tools in the basins after that. So at the moment, no.
Okay, that's great. So if anyone has any good ideas, they should just send them to you, right?
Yes, thanks.
Thanks, Olaf. I'm afraid that's all we have time for in terms of questions right now, but as mentioned, this is the 4th of the webinars that we've had planned in this series, and at the moment we have a space in December penciled in as a tentative date for the final one on green infrastructure. And for those of you who maybe aren't that familiar with the green infrastructure approach, it's about deliberately using natural or semi-natural systems for water management, and the aim is, of course, to provide equivalent or similar benefits to more conventional infrastructure, built infrastructure, or what's usually referred to or sometimes referred to as grey infrastructure, concrete, etc. And part of that webinar is going to be looking at comparative costs and benefits through various case studies. So please join us for that if you can, as I think it's going to be a good one. Further information on the date, the time, and the details, we're going to be making that available to you from our website and other relevant mailing lists once we have those dates nailed down. We're always looking for ways to improve the quality of our work, so we would be very grateful if you could use a couple of minutes to respond to the feedback survey form that you're going to be getting once you leave this webinar. I think please allow me to conclude today's session by thanking both the presenters for taking the time to share their knowledge with us, and also to thank you, the participants, for taking the time to join in and listen and ask some very good questions. If you have any burning issues that you feel we haven't addressed or you come to think about later, you're of course welcome to contact the presenters, or of course to send an email to Maija, and she'll do her best to field those questions. And last but not least, please allow me to conclude by wishing you all a very good morning, afternoon or evening, wherever you are.